adventurers, and welcome to the Micflayers podcast. Now, picture this. You're level 10 to 13. You're really powerful. You barely take damage. Nobody dies. You kill all the monsters in 2 turns. And your DM cries themselves to sleep every night. Welcome to high level D&D. My name is Martin O'Dwyer, and I'll be your host for today's episode. And joining me, as always, is your host, Conor O'Brien. How are you doing, Conor?
Oh, that rang home for me. As some like there's this conception that like high level D&D never gets played because campaigns fizzle out or no one really likes running D&D past level 11, 12. But as someone who has run 2 long form campaigns that have gone into the double digits,
we're just so dedicated.
Yeah, I had to pick worse players next time. People who will lose interest by a nice tight level 9 would be great. Thank you.
Yeah.
No, I'm doing good. Looking forward to this discussion because you and I are both at that point in our individual campaigns where we are DMing for high level players. And yeah, it can be a lot. It can be a lot, but also it can kind of be not be, because I find myself sometimes with D&D when I'm in the early levels of a campaign, when I'm level like 3, 4, 5, I'm usually like, okay, and let's get leveled up. Let's get some cool abilities. I want the guys to have cool abilities so we can do, and I can put them up against these bigger monsters if they have these cool abilities. But then the other side of that is when I get to high level D&D and we're playing like 13, 14, 15, 16 and stuff like that, I'm like, God, I wish we could just go back and fight some hobgoblins. What I'd give for a goblin encounter now.
What is it with you and hobgoblins, man?
I really like hobgoblins.
I was really hoping you could just go, I just think they're neat.
I just think they're neat. Yeah. I do think they're neat. Hobgoblins are awesome. I ran a short arc in the first campaign with hobgoblins.
That, yeah.
When you guys got to Murderstone first, you went, don't worry, it's not all made of stone.
That's like the 5th time you've said that joke on this podcast.
I've definitely said it more than that.
In like the last year, anyway.
You guys went to Murderstone, and there was 2 towns nearby. One was called High Orchard, and then one was called, I think it wasn't the word. It wasn't like a name. It wasn't like a compound word. It was like a made-up name.
Okay.
And then there was one called High Crossing.
Yeah.
And they were like 3 towns along the road to this enormous stone bridge that crossed over into the next kingdom. And I did like a whole. I don't even know if I'd call it an arc, really. It was one of my earliest D&D kind of things, because it was our first campaign. You guys are like level 3 to 5, maybe.
I want to say we're on the higher end of that scale, I think.
Oh, really? Okay, yeah. Maybe. But yeah, and you guys went to you basically went to the small town whose name I can't remember first, and you did like a wall defense thing where some hobgoblins came in there, and then there was like another bit where you had to liberate High Crossing because some hobgoblins and wargs had moved in and taken over it. And yeah, I basically just had this idea that there was like a war band of hobgoblins in the area. Again, to call it an arc is a little bit generous because there wasn't a whole lot of story there. All you knew is that there was a lot of hobgoblins around. There was probably a leader, and eventually you guys did fight the whatever the stat block is. It a hobgoblin warlord is a stat block or
something like that? Yeah,
commander or something like that. Whatever the one in the monster manual is, and you beat him, and then the area was like was saved, and it was cool though. I just think hobgoblins are cool. I like that. They differ a lot in my mind from all these other typically evil races, and I hesitate to even use that term. But what historically would have been the early level monstrous race encounter kind of stuff, where you have bugbears, goblins, hobgoblins, kobolds, orcs, and so on, troglodytes, whatever. They always stood out as being like really cool to me. One, because they fit. You can pair them with bugbears and with goblins, and they fit in beautifully because they're all part of the same. They're all goblinoids. But also because they had this cool. They were just they were just as bad as bugbears and as goblins, but there's something about like when you're fighting goblins, it's like, they're a bit chaotic and they'll rush in, but if you break their line, they'll scatter because they're not like brave. And then bugbears are just so bold and brash and in your face, and they're so strong that they'll happily walk up on anybody. a bugbear that could walk up on a knight with a great sword and full plate armor, and they wouldn't care. They'd headbutt that knight, and they'd be like,
One
because they're all
did.
about strength.
One did. That was that. You just described my character from our first campaign.
Oh,
Like down to the weapon he used.
and then but you throw hobgoblins in the mix. Then and it's like these guys, particularly in how they're styled in the 5e art and stuff. They're styled kind of like some sort of Japanese legionnaire. Like they have the kind of shoulder pads look like they're Japanese kind of samurai armor, but then they themselves are like organized militarized culture where they're all have ranks and they all serve, and they're not just war bands. They're like organized squads and platoons, and they're tactical and stuff, and that just adds a whole extra dimension of fun in my mind. So yeah, I like it. This is not the low level monsters episode, although that'd be a good episode to do.
That wouldn't be a bad episode, actually. Maybe next week.
Yeah, definitely.
Because you love low level monsters, actually. You like adore lower level monsters.
Do you know what it is? I don't know. There's a romance in it, isn't there? Like where, it's great to be playing high level D&D, and it's great to be like currently you guys are fighting the Fomorians, these cursed, banished not gods, but giants.
Yeah.
They're inspired by kind of anti-gods in Celtic culture.
Yes.
But you're fighting them, and these guys are threatening whole continents, and they have armies of giants that are crashing through the land. And currently the king of them, Balor, has a ancient white dragon as a mount.
Yeah, I'm not looking forward to tanking that.
Yeah, these guys this is a really really cool thing, but there's just something that's very, I don't know, Fellowship of the Ring kind of low level, like slightly lower level fantasy, where you can just go off on a quest and it's not too complicated. It's like, oh, the town is like someone stole our holy relic from our shrine in the middle of town. We think it was those hobgoblins up in the hills. Will you guys go get it back for us?
That's literally one of the first 3 quests I gave to my current party when they were like level 4.
Yeah.
It was like
there's always like the blacksmith's daughter or a holy relic or something got stolen or that we got pillaged on the roads or something like that.
I only remember 2 of the 3 of them, and I'm actually at the computer that I have the notes for it stored on. But from what I remember, I can remember 2 of the 3, and one of them was that it was literally like there was an ancient relic being transported from this city to this temple, and along the way it was attacked by someone, and it has been stolen. It was last seen in this area. You can go check that. Go try and find it. And then the next one was there's this village near God, what was the name of the swamp? Yeah, near the, I think it was called near the Dragon Maw Lake. And it's this village called Reedton that's in it. It's basically on the edge of a swamp, and people there haven't been able to sleep for weeks, and when they get fitful bouts of sleep, they're plagued by nightmares, and people have started disappearing. So they went for that one, which was good crack. I got to I basically turned a green hag into the Blair Witch. Yeah. And that was really fun. She was living in a cranog that was out in the middle of the lake that was disguised by a fog that she kept cast on the house.
Okay, just because in our campaign currently we're in Caelda, which is my like Celtic analog for my world. I'm like, I have also been doing a lot of tweaking and adding little bits in here and there over the past few weeks because we've been in the country, so it felt right to be adding stuff to it. And I'm like, how did I not put a single cranog in this entire bloody thing? I need to go back and add like 20 of them now. Like,
just for anyone who doesn't have a fairly deep knowledge of Irish history or anything like that, a cranog was a house that the ancient Celts built. That was like a woven wooden walled house with like mud plaster put on it, essentially like plaster, and then like a straw roof with a hole in the middle that led out to essentially like a chimney. But it was built on like a giant patch.
Artificial.
Like it was built on in a lake on a giant like pillar, basically like a stone pillar or like an earthen pillar that they would build up inside the lake, and then they would put small like hidden stepping stones under the surface of the water that would lead from the cranog, which is basically a big a house, out to the lake. And when I was trying to think of like where could this hag hide near town to mess with everybody but not be seen, I was like, she's a witch's house in the middle of a lake that's a cranog, and she just casts fog cloud on it all the time.
If you had like a swamp environment and like just naturally you're like, oh yes, this place is always plagued by fog and mist. It even on good bright days when the sun is shining, you can still only see about 20 or 30 feet ahead of you. All you need to do is be like, the witch's house is so central to the lake that it's 35 feet away from any shore.
Oh no,
And then like,
yeah, that was
yeah, and then
basically what I
you
did.
can hide it perfectly, like, yeah.
It was sick. It was a really fun mission to get them to go on. Fun fact: she died because I gave one of my players a staff of the python early on, the last druid we
Oh
had,
yeah, yeah.
and so she turned the snake her action, she turned the staff into the python, and then she had the python like grapple the witch with its action.
Oh yeah.
So like,
And hags do not have, well, unless you're an Annis hag.
yeah,
Other
Anna's
hags
hags
don't
are
have great strength.
tanky as hell. But yeah, no, yeah, it just ruined her. It just absolutely ruined her because every time on their turn, even if she broke the grapple or turned invisible, she couldn't even turn invisible because the snake was wrapped around her. Like there'd just be a floating snake wandering around. But yes, so this week we're kind of, as you can probably guess from the last like 10 or so minutes of us chatting, we are talking about higher level D&D. Now, unlike you, Conor, I actually love, like as a player anyway, my preference is for higher level D&D because like what I think D&D.
Well, as a player, I think that's a given for most people. Like it's because when you're the player on the receiving end of all these awesome character abilities, and you've multiple rare and very rare magic items and stuff.
No, those.
It's a real power trip.
Oh
Like
yeah, no, trust me, I love those. I do. I absolutely adore those. But it's the like crazy, insane, like giant story, like ridiculous storylines that you can set up in late game where it's like you're fighting gods and titans and like I think I remember you were asking, I think you asked us this in our D&D group chat one day. I think you were like, what do you prefer, like what, or like what's your ideal kind of D&D? And I think my exact words are, I want to be riding on the back of an ancient dragon pulling the gods from the sky. Like that is the kind of stuff that I love about high level D&D as a player. As a DM, however, I am still enjoying it because with lower level D&D, I can't help myself. I have like these absolutely insane ideas for like set piece battles and like plot lines and all this kind of stuff. I just can't help it. I think I've read too much fantasy. I immediately go to like the scale, just like instead of going like a gradual curve up, my scale goes boom like that straight up in it's a straight line that goes up. So when I think of ideas and they're on that scale, I have to go, okay, we're level 4. Bring it down like 12 notches. I have to like pull myself back. But now that we're like my guys currently are level 14, same as us.
Plus campaigns are, yeah.
We're level 14, and so I don't have to tone those ideas back anymore. It's really fun. It's really really fun, and I really like that bit about it. And this isn't actually inspired by my session last week, which hilarious. Do you remember the way at the start of the session you were like, oh, what's going on in your campaign? And I was like, oh no, I can say what they're going to be fighting because this is going to go out after our session or they're not going to hear it. I arrived to last week's session and my Bloodhunter Seamus was like, oh yeah, Martin, so while I was cooking the dinner, the podcast cows, I just threw it on there, and first 20 minutes of it, and I was like, oh no, I was like, I forgot which week we had taken a break for the birthday, so I was like, oh no, crap, so he knew exactly what they were fighting going into it, but he's a very good player, and he didn't look it up, he just knew it was an ancient deep crow.
Okay, yeah.
So what the original?
To be fair, a relatively obscure monster as far as
so
5e
cool
goes.
though. They're
really
so
cool, but
cool.
like they appear in the Ack Inc. book, which is by no means one of the most popular books. It's a good book, it's fun, but it's not one of the most popular. So not many people would know the stat block very well.
Yeah, I didn't know it. I just saw it and was like, this looks cool. This is a dragon. This is a dragon rock, basically.
Yeah, like a cross. Awesome.
Yeah. So like, I was very excited, but what I ended up doing, actually, I found 2 other lower level monsters that I think you would quite like if you haven't heard of them either. So what I ended up putting my guys up against was the Ancient Deep Crow, and I put them up against 2, I think they're called Phantoms of Baal, Bhaal. and
I'm looking this up now.
they're like these like. So if the ancient deep crow looks more like a dragon fused with a rock or a giant eagle, the phantoms of Baal, they look almost dementorish. They're these like black robed, black hooded, like humanoid creatures. Like they look like just like people in like assassin gear basically, but
Right.
their multi attack is they do two dagger attacks, either melee or thrown, and then they use an ability called Shroud Self where they become invisible. That's their multi attack. They get two attacks and they turn invisible, and it's really fun.
Oh,
It's really fun. But what's also really fun about them is if one of them is within 5 feet of a hostile creature, that creature is now vulnerable to piercing damage. So I was doing things where like I would have them pop up beside one of the guys and like throw two daggers at them or like stab them twice, or like one of them would pop up beside him and then the invisible one would like throw two daggers, and because they're attacking from invisibility every time they have advantage, and then if they hit they're taking double damage because they're now vulnerable to piercing. So they're really fun, really cool, and I think they only have like 27 hit points as well or something. So they'd be really fun. Like one of them would be a really fun like low level boss fight even. Like maybe
yeah,
like
yeah.
one of them has come to assassinate one of the party or something.
How do you spell ball again?
Bhaal, I think it is, or take the H out possibly.
Are these guys from Avernus by any chance?
Yes, I think so.
Yeah, okay. I think I can find him. So, because I know Baal is actually one of the demon lords who I think he used to run Avernus or something like that, and he was displaced by Zariel, and now he kind of works as a lieutenant to like I think he's like essentially an arms dealer
Yeah.
for the devils, which is really cool.
So
But yeah, I'll find it. Yeah,
yeah,
sorry, you
no,
going.
hilariously, I just got a message from one of my players going, started Dark Souls 3 again. I've killed some people and I've not rage quit. Personal growth. Because I used to live with him when I was going on about how great Souls games are and Bloodborne and everything, and he'd seen me play a few, and H was like, I'm going to play these, and then hated them. Absolutely, he just raged too hard. But yeah, they're really fun. So I it kind of inspired this session because the Ancient Deep Crow isn't exactly not a tanky creature. I think it's got like 150 plus hit points. It's got like 168 hit points or something like that.
Yeah, it's not, it's does some nice damage and stuff, but yeah,
Yeah.
it's by no means a massively tanky creature.
No, what I mean is like it's not made of paper. Like it's fairly tanky. Like it's got
But 100 and something hit points?
160 something plus, and okay, yeah, no, that's fair, I suppose. Yeah, for
Whereas maybe,
CR
do you know what?
15, I suppose.
I'm just thinking about compared to you guys currently. Like you guys have wiped that out in a round.
Yeah, which is basically what my guys did. Hilariously, I actually tacked an additional 100 hit points onto it on the second round because they just were annihilating it. Because as I'm sure anyone who's listened for a while may know, I've got basically a party of insane damage dealers. I've got a Lycan Bloodhunter. I've got an assassin. No, sorry, a swashbuckler rogue multi-classed gunslinger fighter, who has a variety of magic bullets that he has made that all have loads of different effects. And then I have a draconic bloodline sorcerer who is also very powerful and really likes vitriolic sphere and disintegrate.
Yeah, only recently have I had a lot of experience with both of those spells.
Yes.
Because
Good old
Gavin
Killian.
lost his character, yeah, and is now playing Killian, the Kailed Wizard. And he's used Vitriolic Sphere a couple times, and that acid damage is severe. But then
Yeah.
he used a Disintegrate on the Ancient White Dragon this week. And do you know what the funny thing was when I did that? I told you this at the time. Someone else had done something to him like a round before or something like that, and I used one of his legendary resistances then, on something, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And then it moved on, and then before I was like, okay, Killian, your go. And then in my head, I'm looking at the stat block, and I'm looking at the one I'd marked down for the used legendary, and I was like, no, I don't want to burn through them all today now in case I have to fight this later on, so I won't use that now. And then he went, I'm gonna cast Disintegrate, and I'm like, oh. and like what semblance of honor I have, I was like, I made the decision, and it'd be shitty for me to go
Yeah.
back on it now. So I'm just gonna take that Disintegrate if he fails, and he ended up failing.
I was
He did,
wondering
like,
why
he,
you
he
didn't
did like
the legendary resistance on that one, because it would have just been no damage.
yeah, I know, but like I had actively said it in my head. I was like,
Mm.
no, I'm not going to use it on this turn now because I want to save some of them for if there's a fight later on. And then he turned to me and went disintegrated, and I'm like, well, look, I made my decision. I gotta stick with it. Like,
Yeah, he took like 60 points of damage. It's like it wasn't a small amount.
it was decent. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. He took enough that the dragon thought twice and pissed off for a bit.
Thankfully, because our airship had 9 hit points left.
Yep.
Uh, but yeah, anyway, the reason
16 D8 cold damage from a dragon will do that to you.
Yeah, yeah, very grateful for my frost resistant boots, or cold resistant boots rather. But yeah, so long story short, they basically nuked the Deep Crow instantly. I had the Deep Crow show up and kind of hover above them. They hid for a while. So I did what I said I was going to do. I slammed my phone down on the table with a 5-minute timer and was like, "It's coming at you. It's coming towards your location. What do you guys want to do?" And within 2.5 minutes, they decided they were 2 of them were going to hide in trees, to try and to like set up an ambush, and the others were going to like hide on in the tree line, sort of without actually climbing the trees. So as soon as it arrived in, like literally as soon as it arrived in, it took a shot from a sniper rifle with it was what was
Sneak attack.
sneak attack shot from a sniper rifle with a magic bullet with earthbind on it. Right,
Oh, wow.
yeah, he wanted to make earthbind rounds and he had the resources to do it, and who am I to deny him?
Pretty smart, to be fair.
Yeah, so he made earth. Thankfully, I think he only has like 2 more. So like, use them now. You haven't fought a dragon in my game yet. But yeah, he earthbind round, and then what really killed me was I have to stop doing it. I have a really bad habit of clicking auto roll initiative for the monsters instead of actually rolling it for myself, and I always roll better when I roll physically. Like than when I roll digitally. I always roll better. I rolled an 8 for initiative for the Deep Crow, which made him second last in initiative order, just before the Blood Hunter. So it went like rogue with a sniper rifle.
Yeah.
Then it went draconic sorcerer. Then it went wildfire druid. Then the other 2 monsters. Then the crow. Then my Blood Hunter. And like, I'm not even joking, they went like, it was the sniper rifle shot with a load of sneak attack, and because he's gone at least 5 levels into fighter, he has 2 standard attacks. So he went like sniper rifle shot, put the sniper rifle down, take out his pistol, shoot it with the pistol, holster the pistol, and it's a 6-shot pistol as well, so he like never has to reload.
Yeah.
And then it came around to the sorcerer, and she cast Vitriolic Sphere. No, it wasn't Vitriolic Sphere. It was a 6th level. What's the other sphere spell? Why can I not remember?
Watery sphere, fiery sphere.
No, Chromatic Orb. It was
chromatic orb.
Yeah, it was a 6th level Chromatic Orb she cast on it. That was acid, and then.
Chromatic Orb is one of the best spells.
Yeah, oh man, I'm so aware. She has nuked so many monsters in my campaign with Chromatic Orbs. But it was Chromatic Orb, and then after the Chromatic Orb then was the Wildfire Druid, and he cast Bones of the Earth. Which is the like 6-pillar one that like pins them if there's a ceiling. Thank God there wasn't a ceiling, because it would have been dead that turn otherwise. But I got to that, and then I got to my Blood Hunter, and he finally used the new like level 2 ability I gave his Vestige, which is basically conjures a giant spectral like moonlight version of the longsword he uses as like a floating greatsword that mimics his moves, and it basically gives him like a 30-foot range on his I nearly said auto attacks in playing League, but on his melee attacks for like a minute or whatever, and it's like once a day. You can use that. So he was like, he couldn't get closer. I was like, oh look, you can use your action to dash if you want. He's like, no, I'm going to use my bonus action to activate this. And I was like, oh yeah, I forgot I gave you that. Yeah, great. And he went slash, and I was like, yeah, it just took a buttload of damage. And I looked at it, it was on like 37 hit points, and I was like, plus 100. And then it reset, and we went rogue, sorcerer, wildfire druid again, and it died. It just died. But what kept going longer was the 2 invisible guys, because I could do the thing with them where because they were invisible, they couldn't just target them with stuff all the time. So I would have them like go around invisibly, and like there was a great one because the rogue was basically holed up in his sniper's nest in the tree, and I was like, Arander, you feel like a palpable aura of like malice and bloodlust from right behind you, and he's like, I look around, he's like, as you look around, 2 daggers fly at your eyeballs. And this thing just appears invisibly, and then as soon as he does the attacks, he re-cloaks again. So they kept going for a little bit, but my party basically steamrolled them, and like I'll give them fair dues for like threat detection and threat assessment, that they instantly went like, this thing needs to die. Now I got my druid down to like red health on D&D Beyond, which is good, like, but like they kind of just blew through it, and like I wanted it to be a little bit more of a set piece battle. Like I wasn't like I wasn't like angry or anything, but I will admit I was a little disappointed it didn't last longer, because I want to give them more challenging fights, if, in a way, like, because I feel like I do the like lore and the storytelling and description really, really well, but as things have gotten tougher and tougher and my players have gotten more powerful, I find it a lot harder to like actually challenge them without just throwing like spam monsters, like I loaded a double of a similar monster for no reason, or just like picking like ridiculous monsters that have no reason to be there. Now, like, there's a narrative reason why there's an ancient deep crow showing up in a random forest on this one continent. Like there's like they don't really, no, I can't say that because they don't know yet. I'm catching myself this time, but there's a lower reason for like these like Sorrowsworn and these like Phantoms of Baal and the Deep Crow, for all of them showing up, and they're gonna find out next session. But like I'm finding it hard, and like I'm still enjoying DMing very, very much. Still get a crazy buzz off DMing. It's one of my favorite things I do. But I do find myself worrying about, like, in like 3 levels time they're going to be level 17 and they're all going to hit their capstone abilities, and like already if I knock, so like, Mike's character Mandroy, he's a wildfire druid, he's already at the level where now if I knock him unconscious, he doesn't get knocked unconscious, he immediately revives back like a phoenix with 70 hit points and does a massive AoE burst of fire damage, because that's the capstone ability of the wildfire spirit. So even if I like, and I have a bunch of them like that, where like even if I do hit, like the one that I think would still be quite good would be like with the Bloodhunter, because he's a Lycan. If I get him below 50% health, he's going to start slashing up the rest of the party, and that would be very, very bad for the rest of the party because he is the tank. So they have no tank if he goes rogue. But yeah, I'm finding myself struggling to like challenge them without just spamming monsters or picking incredibly powerful monsters for no reason. And if there's one thing I will say about our campaign, this campaign, is that I have always felt challenged. Like, there has not been a single fight since, like, I'd say level 4 or 5 that has felt like a walkover. Like, every single time we fight in your campaign, I am like, Jesus Christ. Like, I have like 155 hit points, and I'm immune to crits, and I'm resistant to cold, I'm conditionally resistant to lightning if I can make a con save. I have I'm immune to crits, I have resistance to poison, I have resistance to cold, and I'm conditionally resistant to lightning. And I feel like I made a paper most of the time with your fights. How do you do it?
Well, Martin, the trick is to just stop caring. No, I mean, like high level D&D is like something that it can be so goddamn rewarding. Like real, like when something's pulled off the way you want it to, it can just be the most awesome thing in the world. Like not this week now, but last week, maybe this week as well. But we'll say last week you guys went and you fought a fire giant and a couple of, I think they were death hounds. And
I was sure they were hellhounds.
Oh, no, sorry, they were hellhounds actually. Sorry, yeah. I'm thinking of death dogs actually. These were hellhounds.
Are you thinking like the really ugly dogs, the like yeth hounds?
No.
Those must be the ugliest monster in all of D&D. They look like dogs, but like what's the? Oh, I love him. He's an actor, but he's really. They look like if Steve Buscemi was a dog.
Wow.
I love
Or
Steve.
Steve Buscemi.
I adore Steve Buscemi, but interesting is probably the most polite way you could describe that man's appearance.
Moving on from
Yeah,
insulting Steve
I
Buscemi,
love Steve Buscemi. I love
Hellhounds
Steve Buscemi.
is what it was.
Yeah,
So you fought them, and then you had to destroy a thing I call a drift engine, which is something that lets a cloud giant fortress fly in the air,
yeah.
and that's the enchanted thing that lets it fly.
In my head,
And
it was
then,
like a Stargate and a gyroscope just smashed together.
yeah, do you know what? That's actually a pretty good way of putting it. Yeah. So there was that. You blew that up. You tried to make a run for it. The big bad Balor showed up with his right hand man, Brez, and he and in typical Balor fashion, he's like, Brez, you've been a really good servant all these years. Make sure they go down with the ship. And his job was like, not he wasn't even saying Brez killed them. He was like,
Yeah.
Brez, make sure they don't get out of here before this thing careens into the earth. And you fought Brez, and it was a great fight because I made him a fighter champion. So he had like action surge, and he crit on like an 18, 19, or 20. And yeah, it was cool, and he had loads of attacks and all that kind of stuff. And then you beat him. You made a mad dash out of the castle as it fell from the sky. Leapt over the edge. And we're kind of hovering mid-air, and then out of nowhere, the white dragon with Balor riding on it comes swooping in, and he grabs a hold of you. And then your dog, yeah, I like you guys were like not doing well on health at this point.
We were in a bag. Like the two tanks were in a bag.
You guys were shrunk with a twin spell reduce and put into the bag of holding, while the
wizard, the warlock, and the dog.
Yeah, all collectively rode a broom out of there at a very slow speed because there was so many of them on it.
Yeah.
And they all got like grabbed by the dragon's claw. And then while that was happening, like you were trying to get out and all this, and like no one there has good strength, and it was basically an ability to escape the dragon's grapple.
Frost is strong as hell. Frost is as strong as
I apologize. And that's actually where I was going to, because Frost ended up your dog Frost ended up making a strength check or an athletics check, contested athletics against the dragon, and beat the dragon.
Yes.
And pried open the dragon's claw long enough for all of you to slip out and get away.
War Husky
and like
greater than Ancient White Dragon, confirmed.
Say again?
War Husky greater than Ancient White Dragon, confirmed.
But yeah, so like that took a lot of planning. That was me sitting down for at least a couple hours, not more. Like, especially when it comes to making stat blocks. I made a custom stat block for Brez. And when I'm making monsters, I'll sit down with an A4 piece of paper, and I will write down, okay, what do they have? I'll basically go through the stat block as it is and go, is that what I want? And in this case, I'm like, okay, no. I started off with a regular Cyclops stat block because he's a Cyclops. And I'm like, okay, I don't want him to be armorless. So he's wearing plate. He's going to have 18 armor class. That's that. Move down to health. He's going to have way more health than this because Cyclops is like a very low level giant. And then you guys are obviously very high level. And then I'm like, I'm looking at armor class. I'm looking at speed. Technically Cyclopses have disadvantage, but I'm like, no. He has one eye, but it's a magical eye. He has advantage on perception checks. And I basically go through and I edit and tweak everything bit by bit, and I do it all on paper first. And then when I'm happy with how it looks, then I go over to D&D Beyond and I just input all that into the stat block. And that takes me the bulk of like an hour and a half to 2 hours at least, for one monster stat block. Now, usually I take that long when it's a big boss, or a named character that I want to have a lot of personality in their mechanics. But that takes a lot of effort, a lot of input, and it's amazing when you pull it off, and it makes for a very, very cool session. But yeah, I think how I kind of make them challenging the whole time is, and when I say I was half joking when I said I just stopped caring, I kind of do. Part of me is like, okay, you're going to make almost every encounter deadly, or at the very least, nothing is like, it's like easy, normal, hard, deadly, right? Yeah, nothing for me is below hard. And if something is hard, I'm only making you fight it because I want to drain your resources. Because I want to slap you around just a little bit so you have some health points gone, or so you spend some hit dice or whatever, or because I want someone to expend a smite or use this potion or use a spell slot or whatever.
Use a
Um,
disintegrate.
or disintegrate. But like these are all things that, like, I mean, that's kind of the idea of the game in and of itself, because like an adventuring day is like, oh yeah, like that's why things are calculated for adventuring days, and I never really do that, but that's why adventuring days are calculated how much XP you should be earning that day, because it's like you should be fighting some wolves in the morning, and then in the early afternoon you should be, you know, ambushed by goblins, and then at the end of the night you should be fighting the bugbear who's leading these goblins, and that's your full thing. And each encounter, as well as being a story beat, can be a mechanical thing that literally serves to challenge you, the players, and lower your resources, so that when you do get to the boss at the end of the day, of the adventuring day, that's way more challenging now, because you've already spent some spell slots and you've already drank your one healing potion and all this kind of stuff. Whereas if I just make you fight the boss at the start of the day, it's like it's a cakewalk, you know, and it's not challenging and it's not as dramatic. So I think one thing I do is I always make sure to plan, again, especially in later levels, I always make sure to plan an adventuring day. I want you to have 2 or 3 encounters before you ever get to the main story beat, the main boss battle, or whatever, you know. I'll also, uh, depending where you are, I might put in skill challenges as well. Because I feel like they can kind of fall by the wayside sometimes when you get into higher level play, because your proficiencies are so bloody high, it's difficult not to. But I try to incorporate them as well. Um, yeah. Sorry, I'm gonna have a bit of a spiel here.
No, no, please continue. It's very interesting.
Rein me back in.
We were talking about how you specifically make stuff challenging, because as I said, like I think like I'd have to go back to like single digit levels to when I can last remember we had a fight that was made anything resembling like a walkover, or like I wasn't like I might die here.
Yeah, yeah, and I think, well, I just, yeah. So yeah, I think part of it is you have to like switch off the part of your brain, or ignore the rule that says, yeah, this should be easy and this should be hard, blah, blah. Because after a while, we've talked about this before, CR stops mattering after a while. It works from like levels 1 to 8 or 9, maybe 10 at a push, and then it kind of stops being relevant because there's too many variables for your party to
Yeah.
fall within those parameters anymore.
For reference,
So
that encounter I ran there with the Deep Crow and the Phantoms, the Deep Crow is CR 15, the Phantoms are 5 each.
yeah.
And no, nothing.
Yeah, and like that's the, and like I'm sure if you put that into D&D Beyond, because
It
again
was
the
rated
multiplier.
hard. Yeah.
There you go. Yeah, and that's especially so when you have the multiplier as well, because if you look at the Dungeon Master's Guide, if you put in more and more and more monsters, even at a very low level, you can make a deadly encounter with for a level 10 party
Yeah.
if you put in like multiple challenge rating 1 monsters, because the more there is, it's all action economy. That's another thing I do actually as well. I'll almost always try to match or make the action economy similar. So if this monster normally has 2 attacks, which a lot of monsters do, with the multi-attack feature, I look at how much damage they're doing with that 1 attack, and I'll either go like, well, I think maybe they should be making 4 attacks or 3 attacks, and I'll do that then, because I'm like, I know that if they make these 2 attacks, it'll be maybe on one of my barbs and one of my barbs. One of them might miss, or you know, one of them might roll very low, and I know my barbs are also resistant to bludgeoning, piercing, and slashing, so half that damage is gone immediately. And these are all the things I'm trying to think of. I'm like, I'm actually way more so than early level gameplay. I'm actually kind of building encounters sometimes to purposely counter what you guys can do, and not in a way that I want you to be like that. I'll be like, you'll turn to me and go, "Oh, my barbarian rages," and I'll be like, "Actually, this guy has an aura that says you can't rage," because that's
Yeah.
not fun. But I'll definitely be like, "Okay, I know my barbs are resistant to bludgeoning, piercing, slashing. Typically, this giant doesn't normally get any elemental effects. They just hit you with a big club. But what if that club had some cold damage on it? Because I need to get something to get my barbarians a little bit like worried and a little bit sweating on the brow, like, and I'll do something like that to again kind of counter that. This campaign and it did backfire for me in one instance, but like last campaign I never used fear because you were a vengeance paladin out of a massive aura, and none of the party, if anyone was outside that aura and feared, all they had to do
Yeah.
was run to you, and they were not feared anymore. So I was like, okay, so fear was out the window, and I used fear this campaign a couple of times. Most recently, it kind of backfired because you ended up being frightened for most of a fight, and none of you
Yeah.
could get near the hag you were fighting. Um, but yeah, so I'll try and look for the gaps in my players' armor. Again, not because I want to beat them, but because I'm like, this will challenge them. If I just build an encounter and I'm like just throwing monsters together and not really considering what these monsters, how these monsters kind of click together, I need to know that like certain things these monsters will do won't work, and that's fine. And like that can make my players feel cool, because if my players turn around and like a monster hits them with a fire thing and they're like, oh, I'm resistant to fire, great, the player feels good because I got to have a special thing in a moment where I was, doing well because of whatever. Likewise, I need to have that the other way, because sometimes the monster has to get through your chainmail. That point has to come through and get you just a little bit, because it makes you it makes you sweat. It makes it dramatic, If you and it's fun. Don't get me wrong. It can be fun as players. Like sometimes when you walk into a fight and you decimate the monsters, you just come in. Maybe the DM wasn't ready, or maybe they forgot you had this magic item or this ability, and you go, "Oh yeah, I'll just make him restrained until the end of my next turn." And everyone's like, "Cool, crits all around." Then like just like wailing on the monster. Um, yeah. So I think make your custom make your it is a lot more work. I'm not gonna lie, it's a lot more work. Custom make your encounters to challenge your players, and to almost, not always, but in some cases, seek out their weak spots, and the gaps that the party have, um and also like make sure the action economy is balanced. That's one thing, because something I noticed, if you look at monsters, early level monsters will have one attack.
Mm.
When you start hitting level 5, almost every monster around challenge rating 5 and stuff has two attacks. Sometimes they have one really heavy attack, but it's always kind of balanced that they have about the same damage. But as you get up to later levels, like even monsters up as far as like, take for example the standard Storm Giant stat block is like challenge rating 14 or something like that. It's big. He only gets 2 greatsword attacks.
Yeah.
And they do a lot of lightning damage and stuff on top of the regular damage, but it's like, that's only 2 attacks though.
They have legendary actions though, don't they?
I don't think the standard Storm Giant doesn't. I don't think.
I might be. Do you know what? I might be misremembering because I.
It might be the Quintessence. I think has legendaries.
Oh no! I was saying is like I use Storm Giants as bosses in this campaign, so I give them legendary action. Like any Storm, like I don't think my players actually fought just a Storm Giant. They fought like Mimir the Steel Shaman, and then they fought Donnerstein the Thunder Ram. Like
yeah.
So,
And that's it. And like you showed me stat blocks here in this entire campaign for you, where like you come back and go, this is what my players are fighting this week, and that was going back as far as like maybe like level 8 or 10, and you were showing me like custom monster stat blocks, because in some cases it's cool just to have a monster stat block that really fits the idea you have for the bad guy or for the antagonist.
yeah.
But other times it's just like you need to add in legendaries. You need to add this fire effect to their claws and all this other stuff, because if not, most monsters just aren't going to stand up to an adventuring party in the double digits.
Impressive, sir. You are correct. The Quintessent is the Storm Giant with the legendary actions. Yeah, and that's what the Quintessent was what I used as a baseline, as a base rather, for those 2 Storm Giant bosses.
Yes, I remember, because it has that ability where it can fade into the storm.
Yes.
And I remember you showing me Donnerstein, and I was kind of looking through that. I think at the time I thought you made it up, actually, because I hadn't looked at the Quintessence stat block before.
No, and, I made it up.
I was like, that's a really cool ability, man.
It can't be that good if I made it. No. Yeah, no, like I think for like most of my boss fights, because like most of them have been like named characters that they fought, or at least have had some build up to. I've done what you've done, like off the top of my head, for Mandroy's arc, we had them. There was this whole thing where he was like, he was up against, well, the party specifically, but like he was like essentially a rival of this fire giant leader who was like the prophesized leader of the fire giants by his people to like bring them back and like reclaim the mantle of the Flame Emperor for the Storm Giants. And it was like him and Mandroy were both like essentially like competing for that position. So I think like that guy's name was like Bryn and the Hammer, and he was like his baseline was a fire giant dreadnought, and then I just gave him a bunch of other stuff as well. Then we had for Tharstan, my Bloodhunters back, and I had a guy who was he was essentially like the founder of his order who had gone bad. Or like the second, I think he was like the first recruited member of the order rather, who had gone bad and was now leading an evil like organization of lycanthropes. And that was, if I remember rightly, I think I literally just took the Bloodhunter stat block, and then I just way chunked it up, and like and he was actually wielding an unawakened vestige, because when he turned to the path of evil, it abandoned him and didn't allow him to use any of the other really cool powers. But he was really good. That was fun. It's just a lot, and I think that was like, I think that was probably the first real custom like stat block I had made.
That's the first one I remember you coming to me with, or one of the early ones at least.
It definitely was, because that was the boss fight of the first arc with the two new party members. And if you want a reference for how, because it was a difficult fight, if you want a reference for how difficult I had to make this, even at like level 8 or 7, I think it was 7, I think it was level 7, right? So there was him who was CR 11 for level 7s, and then I had a Blood Witch as well in the fight.
Yes.
And they're pretty powerful for their CR. They can cast Circle of Death.
Yeah.
Like, and only for the fact that I think one of my players had cast Slow on her. So she went to cast Circle of Death, and because she was slowed, it takes a whole nother, like it's like Hyper Beam in Pokemon. You have to take the turn before to set up, and then the following turn it goes off. And I was like, okay, she's doing this, and you can see her casting a spell, and it looks like she's summoning a lot of power for it. And I was like, right, someone will counterspell this, because I know my sorcerer has counterspell. I was like, someone will counterspell this so they don't take like 60 necrotic damage, all of them, because it's a 120 foot radius or diameter or something crazy like that. And I was like, they'll counterspell it. And then the sorcerer's turn came and went, and she didn't counterspell it. And I was like, oh, depending on how rolls go here, this might be a TPK in 3 turns. And I was like, and then the rogue just turned around, pulled a gun out, and shot her in the face. So that, counterspell, death.
No matter how much you work firearms and guns into your game and into the lore of your world, it never stops just being so blunt. When you could say disintegrate this and longsword that and whatever, and it never stops being so abrupt and blunt when you say, yeah, my elf took out a gun and shot her. Like, it's just so just so there, to
be totally fair to him, he has like an NPC who had put in the world, who trained him and has taught him how to gunsmith, and is basically like his mentor figure and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, it is really funny when it's like, oh, I'm gonna cast Hunger of Hadar. I like cut myself along my longsword to like make my blood ignite along the edge, and I'm gonna fight this fiend with it. It's like, I'm gonna pull out my Glock.
There's do you ever watch Key and Peele?
I've seen clips, yeah.
Okay, if you haven't seen it, I'll send it to you later. And it's basically they're playing like a D&D game, and then one of them is the cousin of the dungeon master.
Oh, okay.
And he's like, oh, thanks for letting my cousin join in, guys. He's never played before. And his cousin is like just a little bit gangster and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And he's not, this is not his scene at all. And all the other guys are like, oh, my wizard casts protection on and all this kind of stuff, and they're being really, really nerdy. And he's like, I'm playing an 8 foot tall giant named this, named, I think he's like a giant named. He's named after a rapper or something. I cannot remember what it is.
Dear God.
And the DM is like, oh,
please,
okay,
well, it was Tupac. Please.
It might have been. I can't remember.
It was either, if I have to guess, it was either going to be Tupac or Biggie.
I'm leaning more towards Tupac, but I can't remember. And then he's like, I'm playing an 8 foot giant named Tupac. And then the DM's kind of like, oh, okay, yeah, that doesn't normally giants aren't really a playable. It's fine, yeah, sure, whatever, okay. And then later on, he's just like, when all the guys are like, oh, I'm gonna cast fireball and stuff like that. He's like, I pull out my AK-47, I load a mag, and I just go to town on him, and he's like, and like all the other players are like kind of getting into it, and the DM's getting really annoyed. He's like, no, there's no AK-47s. He's like, after that we go to the club, we get some honeys, and all the two other nerdy players are like, we want to go to the club as well. And the DM's just getting really annoyed. He's like, this isn't how you play.
Yeah. No, it is. It is. Have you ever seen that meme where someone photoshopped? Do you know when in the Hobbit movies when Gandalf finds the trolls hoard and it's got all the like elven swords from like. Also, if there's ever been a more clear like DM loot drop in a movie, it's in that Hobbit movie where they go into they like fight a bunch of trolls, nearly die, escape by the skin of their teeth, then check out the troll cave, and there's like 3 swords from the first age in there. Like there's Glamdring, there's Orcust, and I think Sting was in there as well, wasn't it?
Sting was in there.
In D&D terms, those are goddamn legendaries.
In D&D terms, the DM rolled on a random table and rolled way higher than expected.
The amount of times,
that's the equivalent of when I rolled on a table and got a +3 shield for you, and I was like, well, shit, I'm committed now. Just
because of the amount of times you've given out about that, I specifically haven't rolled random loot in a long time. In a long time, I haven't rolled. I think not since they were single digits. But yeah, I suppose the point is, like, I guess we're trying to make is that, like, when it comes to higher level D&D, it is going to take a lot more of that custom thing. And you know what? In hindsight, I probably should have done a bit more custom work on the Ancient Deep Crow. I have, however, decided that I'm going to bring them back as like a recurring thing tied to a specific villain. Because they're two, them and the Phantoms. I like the Phantoms quite a bit. They actually remind me a lot of, there's an enemy in Elden Ring called the Black Knife Assassins, and they like it before the game. Like there's I think it's called the Knight of the Black Knives or something like that. But they basically another god steals a fragment of the rune of death and uses that to temporarily imbue all these assassins' blades with like power from that rune, and they murder a god. And like that's what starts the whole plot of Elden Ring. And like you could fight a couple of these in Elden Ring, and they're nasty. Like they're permanently invisible, basically. I think so. Unless I think you might be able to knock them out of invisibility temporarily if you do enough damage to them. But like they're like invisible. They're really really fast, and they do a ton of damage. And like what's worse is because they are invisible. Like there's this one town called like Celiana. I think it's Celiana, town of sorcery. But you go around it, and you have to light these 4 torches to open up a way to this area called the Halig Tree, where like this really really difficult boss is. So it's like an area that you're gonna spend time around, and like while you're there, there's like sorcerers like shooting magically conjured bows at you as well. So you're like trying to dodge all this, and then if you walk around this one particular wall, and you're like in an area, you're like, oh great, I'm gonna stay by this wall. This building is blocking me from view from all the archers, and then you hear footsteps behind you, and suddenly your health starts going like this down, and you're like, what the fuck is going on? And like you're panicking, and like I just hit like lock on in panic, and it just locks onto this like blank patch of screen, and I can just hear the footsteps again. I'm like, oh shit, it's a Black Knife Assassin. Like it was such a good moment.
Oh, okay, question.
Yes.
Because when you said that they're like permanently invisible, my mind went to like Energy Sword Elites in Halo, or that one mission in Jack 2 Renegade where you go to Haven Forest and you have to kill 30 like powerful metalheads, but they're all invisible constantly. Are they like literally 100% invisible, or can you see like a shimmer?
They're not. No, it's not like Predator cloaking. It's like like the only reason you can kind of keep track of them is because the area you're in, it's got snow on the ground, so you can if you're paying attention, you can see their footprints.
Okay.
And you can hear them as well if you're listening close enough. So the Souls games like to do that. There's actually a boss in Dark Souls 1, I think it is. Yeah, Dark Souls 1, where like when the boss fight starts, she cloaks and she can hit you invisibly. She doesn't have to like return.
Decloak,
She doesn't have to return to visibility to hit you.
Yeah.
So the only way you can tell where she is you have to listen for her footsteps, and the area you're fighting in is snowy, so you can see her footsteps. So you have to like watch and listen for her attacks and like dodge when you see her coming towards you, and then when you hit her, she'll come out of invisibility, and then you can fight her properly. But yeah, it's with stuff like I just feel like with the deep crow. Sorry for the random tangent, but the deep crow and with the phantom, I think I think I might bring them back as a recurring thing, because I was using Sorrow Sworn as that, but I think for variety I'll start rotating those in, and I've also kind of planted seeds of like terrible flying beasts in the sky over. Remember last week I said that the villain basically broke a country in thirds a few weeks ago? Yeah, so like that's my Greek Roman place. And so it took over like half the country, and then like broke off one specific city state so that no one could help it, and then broke off another chunk, and now there's like the majority of it is still in one piece, but like broke off two fairly sizable pieces of this country, and monsters have kind of are swarming over it now, and the line is kind of being held at one of the other city states by like a small militia force and this kind of stuff, but over the skies there's a report like no sky ships have been going there because there's like reports of just like terrible winged beasts there. So like I might like I think I was gonna do like something with a dragon stat block and might custom it up, but I think I might just make like a really wicked ancient deep crow or something similar.
Dragon Mindflayer, go for it.
It already exists.
That's what I'm saying.
In Spelljammer.
Just use that stat block.
Oh, dude. Oh, that thing I don't.
The one from Fizzbands.
Yeah, from Fizzbands. I don't even like.
The one that vomits tadpoles.
The one that vomits tadpoles and makes you like take damage and go through Ceramorphosis. Yeah, no, I'm good.
Yeah.
I don't want my campaign to end instantly because all of my players have terrible con aside from my Blood Hunter.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, it's just a lot. I suppose it is just a lot more effort on the DM's part to make things challenging. But
I think like we like okay, so high level DD like often teeters out and stuff like that, and people lose interest. But I think it's not always the player that loses interest or the players. You know, like I think the insinuation is that like it's a DM as well. I feel like the insinuation is that like some of the players didn't stick it out or something like that, and then whatever, and that can happen. But I do feel like there's a large part of it where the DM can get burnt out on this particular campaign as well, and I'm like I've been there. Fuck it, I'm coming up on that line in this current campaign, only for the fact that we're bouncing around and doing some interesting stuff at the moment. We literally went from what did we do? We did like spy revolutionary kind of stuff, and then we did a dragon and a deep worm and some elemental stuff, and now we're in another place doing giants. So we're getting quite a variety of stuff in there, and only for the fact that we're hitting a lot of new marks and keeping it fresh. That's kind of keeping me in it. But I was the same last campaign though. Like we were months off the end of our last campaign, and I was already planning stuff for this campaign. You know, like my mind wanders too far ahead is the problem. But so I feel like it can be challenging mechanically to design encounters and write up custom stat blocks and try to make things fit in that way. It can be really challenging from a DM perspective to plan in such a way that, because like players get so powerful at a certain point that it's really hard to challenge them accurately. Not even just in combat. Combat's probably the easiest way to challenge someone actually in high level play when you think about it. But like if you want to do like traps, or if you want to do like puzzles and stuff like that, people have so many high level spells and abilities. Like slightly lower level example, but remember you said about the skull puzzle your players had, and they used and because it was specifically skulls, your blood hunter used grim psychometry to psychometry to use his vision to be able to see where the skulls should go. That was really clever, but like
high enough I couldn't say no. Like
yeah, exactly, yeah. And like that's the thing though, like, and it's at later levels that's even more pervasive, because people can have one much higher, like your players get to a point where like it's hard to kind of keep them, I don't know, okay, example, like campaign 1, there was a point where Shamash went back to Murderstone, and I think he wanted to check on the house and stuff like that, but he knew from whatever point that they had a handful of these anti-magic
Shackles.
what's it called? Manacles, thank you. Um, these anti-magic manacles, and they only had a handful of pairs in the city because it's not a very magic-rich city.
Mm.
But on the one hand, or on the rare occasions that an evil mage or someone comes through, they need to be able to disarm them efficiently. So you slap these manacles on, and then they can't do magic, basically.
Yeah.
Um, and he's like, "Oh, we're going to face a really powerful. The Clockwork Man's a really powerful wizard. We need to basically get something that can disarm him." And he went back there asking for them. And I think I had to make a persuasion check, and he didn't roll very high. And it was a high. Now he's a sorcerer, so he's got high charisma. And but I also said, look, it's going to be a high DC because they only have a couple of pairs of these things. These things are not easy come by. And also, they belong to the city. It's not like it's one dude selling them. They belong to the city. It's like going up to a police officer and saying, "Hey, I know like these are like issued to you by the government, but can I have your nightstick, please? I'll give you money for it." It's like, no, this was given to me as part of my job. I can't just
Yeah.
hand these things out. So yeah, so he asked, and then he failed the deception, or the persuasion, I should say.
Yeah.
And I said to him, as the city watch guard, he was like, "No, look, we only have a couple of these things. They're not easy to come by, so we need to keep them here on the off chance that something was to go wrong." Uh, and Mike kept like pushing it. I'm like, "Look, man, you failed the check. Like it's
Do you
you
remember
can't have it."
do you remember what his backup plan
So
was?
so then he's like, "Okay, well, his backup plan was, well, I'm a mage, so if I was to do something illegal, you would have to get those manacles out and put them on me, right?" And they were like, he was like, "Don't do anything you shouldn't be doing. Like, I see what you're getting at, stop it." And then he's like, "Yeah, like for example, what if I started destroying public property?" And I think at first he cast a small spell,
He got
and the guy was
Shatter.
like, "No, that he did that later. He cast a small spell at first and like broke something." And he's like, "Don't be casting magic or throwing flames or anything at things. You'll cause damage and people could get hurt." And then he was like, "Cause damage, you say?" And then he cast Shatter on a house, like it's just
Yeah.
a small residential house. And like because it's a structure, it takes double damage. And then he rolled it, and he did loads of fucking damage. And I described like all the windows being blown out, and the roof slightly collapses, and some of the brickwork crumbles a little bit. And I'm like, "Yeah, you see a family of four. The father like braces himself in the doorway and ushers the rest of the family out to safety because they're afraid their house is going to come down on them." And then he was like, "You gonna give me those manacles now, or you gotta arrest me? You need to arrest me now." And then and he was like, "We're not gonna arrest you if you keep this up. Like we're gonna take some pretty serious action here." So I think he did something else again, and he actually properly destroyed the
For
house.
some reason, I have him casting Earthquake in my head.
I don't think he cast Earthquake.
I
He
don't
definitely
think
cast
that's
Shatter.
yeah, because I don't think Earthquake is even on the Sorcerer spell list.
Even if it is, I don't know if
Yeah,
Mike took it.
it's like an 8th level spell as well.
Yeah. But yeah, so he started doing all this stuff, and in the end, I was like,
Oh
okay,
no, Earthquake is on the Druid spell list. Oh.
that's your problem now.
Yeah.
Um, Although that being said, I was like, when I found out Mike wasn't playing a caster this campaign, I was like, this should be so much easier because him as a sorcerer, like he was just breaking their game in all sorts of ways, and now he's playing the most broken barbarian, which is the zealot, who I cannot kill. In like most circumstances, I cannot kill him as a character. The most I could probably hope to do is that a giant will pick him up and throw him away, and that'll be that. Like just drop him in a hole. Um, but yeah, so he did that, and then instead of like at the end of it, then instead of actually like getting arrested, they were like, "Yeah, you're assaulting people and destroying property. We're just going to kill you."
Yeah.
So he called in the other guards, and they were like, crossbows and everything at the ready, and they fired at him, and I was like, I can't really reel him in because he's gotten too powerful. And like sure I could say, "Oh yeah, a 20th level wizard walks in and stops
Yeah.
you," but the thing is, like, I know that wouldn't happen, and I kind of feel like I need to be true to the world. And this place would not have a 20th level wizard just strolling around. So yeah, and I had to like basically, I think I hit him with like, I don't know, 88 crossbow damage, just like a barrage of bolts coming at him. And he took one, and I think he took the second one, and then he like teleported himself out. But like, there's also some stuff like that where like when players have when players are so much more powerful than everything in the world,
Yeah.
it's kind of like that's when alignment comes in. You gotta really be like, are you a villain? Because this is not that kind of campaign. Um,
A mistake he
yeah,
repeated.
a mistake he repeated. I said morally ambiguous,
Yeah.
Mike. That doesn't mean evil.
It's so messed up when I like specifically set out to not be the moral center of this campaign because I did it last campaign, and then
You were the dad of the party
he's
last campaign.
yeah, and he's so chaotic and just like not evil but just an asshole. That
Yeah,
like I ended up going from I guess Lug is kind of great to Lug is the dad of the party again.
yeah. Even when it's like, and obviously now because we're in the middle of like a thing that has to do with your home country, but
Yeah.
even when we're not, you still have to be the one that, like, Wabu will be the one who turns around and goes, "Why don't I just go up there and stab them with my swords?" And then you have to be like, "Wabu, no."
No.
Like you have to be like,
Don't.
you have to stop him. So that, and like, do you know what it was though? It's like, to be fair, I will say when Gavin was playing Aerith for a while, Aerith was a little bit of that as
Yeah.
well. Thankfully, because
We
Wabu
can't
was
take
so
much more
chaotic.
chaos.
Wabu was so chaotic, and then Arkham was so indifferent about things as well. It's like Arkham would never be the one to tell him not to do something, so it had to be you.
Yeah.
And the three of you ended up making these kind of
The triangle of
characters.
hate.
Yeah, yeah. Well, each of you made a character though that was like didn't really care about like what you each of you wanted to be the semi-neutral character, and it just fell to you again that you had to be the dad,
Yeah.
and whip people back into shape and stuff. We're going off topic a lot, by the
We
way, on
are,
terms.
but we've started. Yeah, I can't speak today. We are, but we've got some good stuff. So far in terms of in terms of I suppose the higher level. I guess it's just something that I'm kind of getting anxious about as a DM now because, like, even with the vestiges, all of my party have vestiges because they're the champions of gods. They all have vestiges.
Yeah,
Those vestiges all have another stage to evolve to. They're all level 2 now, but they all have another
yeah,
stage to evolve to. So they have another even a further level of power, and the third level of a vestige's power generally tends to be quite broken. Like it's
yeah.
like what is the one from Rune's Wake again?
That's a spear, isn't it?
Yeah,
From
that's the spirit. Like it's just it's really really powerful. Like the one I know off by heart is the Titanstone Knuckles. That one, like when you rage, you can cast enlarge on yourself, and then you are also resistant to like all of the elemental damage, like fire, lightning, cold, and fire, lightning, cold. What's the other one?
and nearly fire, cold, acid,
Thunder.
thunder,
Velvet.
lightning.
Yeah. Fire.
I very nearly gave those to Wabu in this campaign.
God damn.
Cause like you know when he fought a
Yeah.
high level Durgar monk
Yeah.
1-on-1, and like it was a tough fight. It was a very close fight. And I was like, I wasn't holding back because I knew he wasn't trying to kill him. So I'm like, I can just really go for it here, and I don't have to feel bad if he loses because he, you know, whatever. And it was for a very powerful ring that Wabu was in possession for. Your man was like, and do you know, do you know what the funniest part about that is actually, is that you were talking about it in like the entrance hall of their monastery, right? He went up and he challenged Mike, and I had planned in my notes and everything. I was like, okay, he's going to go up and he's going to want to challenge Wabu for the ring because he doesn't believe he should have it and it should be kept safe here.
Yeah.
So he's going to challenge him. And right then and there, I was prepared to offer the Titanstone Knuckles as the wager. Like, I'll wager these against that, and whoever wins, you know, gets to keep both, basically. But then Mike jumped the gun, and as soon as he challenged him to a fight without any wager, he's like, I'm there, let's go. So he didn't have to actually wager the Knuckles at all.
I would have been so jealous. Those are like my favorite vestige of all time.
They're very cool. So yeah, so he so he actually missed out because he was too anxious just to get into a scrap with somebody.
Bro.
That he actually missed out on a really cool item. And then I was even going to do it in such a way that like if he had lost the fight, your man would have taken the ring from him but would have given him the Knuckles in return. But in the end Mike ended up winning by a hair, but he won. Yeah.
I'm gonna tell Mike that Wednesday at D&D so I can see the look on his face.
Honestly, he was just. I had it in my notes. I'm like, because I didn't think Mike would like. Realistically, if he comes up to you and you own something, and I come up to you and go, I'll fight you for that. And then like, the first thing any reasonable person would do is be like, what do I get if I win? You know. But he didn't. He was like, let's go, let's have a fight.
There's one word in there that shouldn't be in there when you're considering Mike.
Reasonable.
That's the one. That's the one. But yeah, I like at least I don't have mine anymore, so you know. But yeah, I so like all my guys have a third stage of their vestige to go to, and like I just straight up ripped the exact template of the Mercer ones because I really like those, and they're quite powerful.
Yeah.
Like they're very very powerful.
They're great. Even if you want to reflavor them, obviously some of them are very specific to Exandria and to Mercer's world.
And some of
But
them
if you even want
suck.
to reflavor some of them, you can redo them. Like mine, the Titanstone Knuckles actually in my world. I don't know if I call them that or not, but
You
I don't know
did.
if I actually gave them a name.
Yeah,
Oh,
you
did I?
did.
Okay.
Yeah, you did.
At least I did to you when I told you, like when I told you he has these gauntlets or these bracers made out of stone.
Oh
You
no,
know straight away what they were.
Oh yeah, but you also literally said that they were the Titan Stone Knuckles.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
fair enough. To be fair, in this world though,
I know where that guy sleeps, right? And you were like, I suppose, and I was like, okay.
Yeah. To be fair, even though they don't, not all these magic items fit into all worlds, these actually do fit because you guys were on a mountain range, which was a crumbled ancient Earth Titan that had, one of the Titan gods of this world that had died here and crumbled, and the mountains left behind were his remains. So it makes perfect sense that these would be here, belonging to a monk who made his monastery on the mountain, or at least lived in the monastery on the mountain. But yeah, there's other like challenges with high level play that aren't just mechanical as well though. One thing that I always find, and it's from a writing and world building perspective, is that typically when you get to high level play, or at least in the campaigns I've run so far, which is admittedly only 2, but they've been really long form campaigns. And you're actually almost certainly at this point as well now because you have a druid and a sorcerer in your party.
I am at that point.
People can move around super easy, whether it's being able to, or even not even move around, but sometimes they'll find things out. You can cast things like legend lore, you can cast scrying on people at any time. People can cast teleport to get to this other place very easily, or tree stride.
Transport via plants.
Right, I always think tree stride. It's not.
That's because they always said it wrong in Critical Role. No, yeah, my guy. So Mandroid can cast transport via plants, and not only can they do that, but because they did the whole giant thing, they got like what was essentially a giant, like a 2-person like dinghy basically, for giants, but it was like an airship. But when that's scaled for storm giants, the 2-person dinghy can very adequately hold 4+ people of medium size really easily. So now they have a giant airship that travels quite fast. So they have an airship. They also have they have an airship. They're also at like this. This is why I love how Mike's brain works. And another thing I love about high level D&D is where you can do ridiculous stuff like this. At the moment, one of the things he wants to do is put a tree on the ship that will magically grow to full size to allow them to use transport via plants on and off the ship. So like they could like big enough like, and I'm like,
you know the ring transporters in Stargate SG-1 where all the rings come up out of the floor. That he wants to build one of them essentially a druid's version of that. Yeah,
essentially. So a very high level wizard NPC is working on that for them at the moment. Who's like the headmistress of like this mage's college that they've been to a few times, actually quite a few times as such. But like I am at that point where like you have to like you basically kind of have to have at least the known world prepped every time, or at least know what's going on there every time. But one way I got around that, and it's like because I had like a Japanese area that was like this dragonborn territory called Yosai Ryu, and what I did was I said that that place was specifically set aside for the Dragonborn in this world by Bahamut, and so Bahamut put like protections on it, so you cannot teleport on or off Yosai Ryu. It's magically prevented by like divine by like a god level magic essentially. Because I wanted them to have to journey through this place and like actually have to walk through or ride horses through it. And I had other magical stuff, like other cool kind of magical transportations. There was like this waterfall with like giant lotus flowers at the bottom of it, and you could step into the middle of it and everyone hold hands, and then the flower like closes up around you and floats up the waterfall. I had that, and I had other cool stuff as well, but I specifically didn't want them to teleport. So I just like, I guess like what I'm trying to say is like, if you don't want them to do something, and like not for like a malicious reason, but just like if you want them to like take the story pace a little slower in one specific area, just don't let them do it and come up with a lower reason for it. Like my guys now are going to at the moment they're on like a small side quest that's taking them to the home base basically of the Monster Slayer organization that is in my world, that one of the part that our Bloodhunter is a member of, is they're called the Kin, and they have a base that's basically inside this mountain range. But if you look at it in the map, there are like mountains that run up the side of this peninsula of land that stretch up to the north, and then there's a whole just big bunch of like scrap wasteland to the right of it, because that's what the map maker saw. But if that map maker was a member of the Kin, he would have seen the Kin's home base, because it's divinely protected by the moon god, where it's got this like kind of illusory barrier on it that only if you are a Kin member, you have lycanthropy, and you have specifically one of their, they have like, do you know the Witchers have the medallions?
Yeah.
The Kin have like like in this part of their armor here, like the underside, there's like a small recess in the gauntlet where like a silver coin with a wolf's head on it sits, and that's basically their proof of being a Kin member. So you have to have that be a lycanthrope, and be a Kin member. To get in and actually be able
that
to
mean
see
that
it. Otherwise, if you look like, because what happens is like if you look in that direction, like if you even just looked at it, you would notice it was weird, because the mountain range beside it just kind of cuts off. It just goes mountain straight to flat ground, and that just doesn't happen in nature. It goes mountain like foothills,
and like
it slopes down.
tears down. Like.
So like if you look at it, it looks unnatural. And I had this great moment where like one of my players looked at it and was like, you look at the mountains and you see like this like big ridge of mountains that go up the left side of this peninsula land, and I was like roll and I think it was like had a roll like nature or wisdom or something like that, but she rolled really high, like 19, 20 or something like that. And I was like, you look at it and you notice that the mountains just kind of end, and then there's immediate flat ground, and you know yourself from living in a mountainous area, that's not how mountains work. It goes hills, foothills, mountains. And I said, and as soon as you have that thought, it disappears from your brain and you don't remember having it. So like if you don't fulfill the clauses to be able to see through the barrier, if you look at it and you have any kind of a suspicious thought about it, it is magically removed from your mind by divine magic.
That's kind of cool.
So you can set up stuff like that, and you can go as ridiculous with it as you want, just as long as you have a good justification for it in the lore of the world. And like,
it's not to like to stonewall your players or tell them no, you can't go here. It's like you can, but kind of you need to maybe take your time, like, because one, maybe I don't have that area prepped yet, and I could ad-lib it, and I've done that, and it comes out okay, but I don't think players see it personally. I've done that with a few locations. I think at one point, actually, I was not prepared for you guys to go to Caprica, which was the capital city of the former empire and stuff.
Yeah.
And you only went there one time, but I wasn't ready for that. I didn't have a place planned. And then you're like, yeah, we're going to go here. You teleported or flew there super easy. And then I had to come up with all this stuff about like having these spiraling towers and all these bridges interconnecting them and airships everywhere. And I made it all up on the fly, and I'm like, it was fine. I think it did a job, and I think it was a cool image for people. Mm-hmm. I don't think the players were bugged by it, but I was like, in my head, I'm like, that seemed hollow to me, because I know I didn't put the time into that, and I probably could have thought of some more. There was a lot of broad strokes.
Yeah.
And I think it got the shape of everything correct, but I don't think that I got kind of some of the more finer details. There's one or two finer details I could have put in to make the place seem a bit more real. It's very easy to say, oh, it's a big sprawling city with hundreds of buildings and a castle in the middle. But until you say something interesting like, oh, the castle has shimmering walls of water surrounding it, and it's something unique that just grabs someone, it doesn't really solidify itself. So for me as a world builder, and look, it happens every campaign. You guys have an airship now as well. Usually there's like someone can teleport. There's an airship, or whatever. you can get from A to B super quickly. I was happy enough to give you guys an airship this campaign because you did a lot of hex crawling. We did a couple of sessions of hex crawling in a forest when you were looking for some ancient burial sites. And you were kind of traveling through the countryside on the way to Solaster and stuff. So I'm like, the guy's got a little bit of like overland travel, a little bit of hex crawl stuff in there. So I was happy to give you an airship at a certain point and go, let's speed up the process here a little bit and get
Yeah.
you guys wherever you want to go, you know?
Yeah, no, totally. And like I absolutely have done that myself sometimes as well. Like sometimes the players just ask for something that you just either haven't thought of or haven't prepped. And again, like this kind of only gets exacerbated by the high level stuff where they can like bamf around to anywhere. And if you're like, oh yeah, maybe there's one here, make an investigation check. And then like if you've a rogue on the party, your rogue goes, I'll do it. Or if you've a blood hunter in the party, I go, I'll do it. Or if you've both, they'll go, I'll do it and I'll help him. And him has a plus 13 to his investigation. So whatever they want, they've found it, unless it's massively out of the bounds of sensibility. And you just have to pull a shop and an NPC and a catalog just out of your hole. And sometimes that happens, and sometimes you have to ask your players 4 weeks later what the name of that NPC was because you just improv'd it and didn't write it down.
That happens to me so often, like so often.
There's like my blood hunter has started a thing now where he's got a habit of making mugs out of the skulls of his fallen enemies. So no, it's actually pretty badass. He's got a big mad like lycanthrope werewolf head Stein for himself from the bad werewolf guy that they killed. And other bosses that he's killed, he's made Stein. He's made mugs out of their heads as well, and given them as gifts to the other party members and stuff. It's actually pretty cool. And I've got to like develop that NPC a bit, but like I couldn't tell you right now what their name is. I'd have to go back and look for that, like dig, and like I'd have to dig deep. But like, and those are some of like we were saying with lore and stuff. I think with like stories as well, like once you get to a higher level, everything has to kind of start intertwining and wrapping up and kind of coming to a point where it's all starting to join up and come to the middle. And like I'm looking at it now, and like I said, my guys have vestiges. They've got to get to the third stage of their vestige, or I have to have something prepped that could potentially get them there. So that's got to be like a big like personal moment or a big challenge or like some kind of like emotional turmoil, that like something that will cause emotional turmoil that will get them there. They've got all that, but I have also written in that they have to go and get boons from other gods to like help them defeat the big bad. And like I have ideas for everyone in terms of how that's doing. That's sort of floating around in my brain, and I continue to work on it, but I haven't actually written that down yet. So those are going to have to be like, one, very quick arcs because I don't want this to drag out, and two, they're going to have to like be meaningful as well, and that's a weird balance to strike, quick and meaningful. It's usually not the way it goes. So like that's something with higher level D&D that I'm kind of anticipating will be a little bit more of a struggle once I get around to writing that. But I think it's because, like I said, like as a player, my favorite part of D&D is when you were doing the insane, like saving the world, like fighting gods, like riding on the back of a dragon across like a volcanic landscape while it explodes behind, like all that kind of mental, like high fantasy end game stuff. That's all some of my favorite stuff as a player. So I think like my enthusiasm for that when I'm DMing also comes over, and like that kind of helps me get through the slog work of that. But it is a lot of writing and it's a lot of work, and I think the hardest thing to find and to do with that stuff is to find, like, it's pretty much what we've been talking about the entire time, is like to find a justification why it's like that. Similarly, like with the combat stuff, like there's a story Matt Mercer told about his first DM, and he was saying like, yeah, he was a really nice guy, but like we'd be walking down the road and there'd be a bush and 18 barbarians would come out of the bush and be like, wow, how do 18 barbarians hide in that one bush? No. And it's like that kind of thing where like a red dragon isn't just going to appear in the middle of a city. Unless that's...
Is the word, is it verisimilitude is the word?
Verisimilitude is the appearance of truth in a performance. Something like that. But
maybe not exactly, but along the same lines where it's like, look, you can totally have 20 barbarians jump out on the side of the road, but maybe you have more than one bush.
Yeah, I think it's like verisimilitude is probably the appropriate term for that, actually. Do you know what? I think like the strict definition is like the appearance of truth in a play or something like that. But like, yeah, it's so that it doesn't like mess with the like narrative flow of the world or the logical flow, because even magic has logic to it, like, you
Yeah.
know what I mean. And like especially with stuff like dragons and higher level stuff, you kind of have to throw at your party. Like you're saying, unless you make like custom stuff, it's gonna be a strain, both storytelling wise and believability wise, for you to be able to include a lot of the obstacles you kind of have to include as a DM for players when they get to that certain level. Um, is there anything else you kind of can want to chip in about in terms of like high level D&D? I'm just conscious of our time at the moment.
Oh, good. We're 125, so we're not too bad. Um, so world building kind of, because the pace of things increases,
Yeah.
world building can be a challenge as well. You need to, which is why this campaign, and it's kind of, to be fair, it's kind of come out a lot better for us this campaign. Um, World building wise, I've kept this campaign restricted to only a couple of neighboring kingdoms,
Mm.
and you guys haven't strayed outside of that.
Yeah.
Which is really, really good, because in the previous campaign it was a continent hopping thing, and literally, um, like you guys had, at one point you guys are like, oh, I think you just decided, yeah, let's go to the Dragonborn place just on a whim, and I'm like, I have literally nothing done for it. Um, so like I had to come up with a load of stuff on the fly, and again, you can flesh it out as you go, but I like the initial. I feel like people listen a little bit more and a little more engaged when it's your first time hearing about something, because when it's the first time you have no information. So you're like, where are you? What's going on? And then you can answer those questions. And if you have something prepped and it's interesting and deep, then you can really hook someone early on, or you can get the important points in there.
Mm.
But when you have to do it on the fly and you can only think of a couple details, and you can't think of this other thing you had in your mind the other day that you were wanted to implement, then you might not implement it initially, and then a session later you might come back and go, oh yes, and there's this other thing, but people aren't listening at that point because you've established where they are, and they just want to go, we know where we are, we know where we need to go, we have to go to this castle and talk to this guy. So it kind of becomes a bit out of place to then start lore dropping after you've already established the lore of where you are, you know.
Yeah,
um
exactly.
so, yeah, that can be a challenge. Again, my advice to that is do what I did this campaign as opposed to last campaign, which is confine it to a kingdom or two that are like nearby, or a couple of like a cluster of countries,
Mm.
and have just a vague idea of each settlement and stuff like that. And then that way, it kind of, you can get the important points you want to in. But again, if it's a huge continent hopping world thing, it's a lot more difficult that way.
Yeah.
There was something else, so that's yeah, because there's world building challenges, there's combat challenges, and I feel like there was another one I wanted to mention, and I am blanking on it. The story is kind of a thing as well, like you mentioned,
Yeah.
in terms of,
Trying to like wrap everything up and get it to
yeah,
converge and stuff.
yeah, and like I don't write campaigns that way. I don't write campaigns start to finish. I maybe have an opening arc, and then I kind of see where things go.
Yeah.
Um, so like it tends to be more like one campaign is not like one enormous arc in my mind. It's like several interlocking arcs. Sometimes they overlap into each other and stuff like that, but typically it's like several arcs that I want you guys to explore at different times, and you might spend a couple months of sessions on this one, and then all of a sudden you're over in this place doing this other thing, and that can be good for keeping like interest and stuff. But yeah, so I think it's hard to plan ahead story-wise and know exactly how you want to wrap everything up. And the thing is as well, the speed of a campaign like increases massively. Like
Mm.
it accelerates when you hit those higher levels, because you're killing more things, you're doing more things, you're getting around faster, you're more capable, and you maybe have more contacts as well. Players at like level 3 and stuff will be like, oh, is there a blacksmith in town? I don't know what their name is. And whereas players at like level 14, 15, and 16 are like, let's go talk to the Archduke of such and such a place because we met him that one time and did that job, and he'll definitely have an audience with us. So like
Yeah.
immediately the players are like almost getting away from the DM a little bit, and they're bouncing around to all these places because they know the world not as well as you, but
Yeah.
collectively they have enough knowledge that they can go off and do these larger strokes that you're not maybe directing them as much with, you know.
Yeah, your players
Um,
definitely like as with their power increases as the levels go on. So too does their agency. Like they can do more and more and
that's
more
it, yeah, yeah.
independently of you, of you setting
And
it up. Like
that's not a bad thing as well. Sometimes
no,
it's good to let players, but like we said, having extra agency is really really great. In early D&D, you're wanting players to have agency and make their own choices, but they don't have enough information. And then in the late game, they have enough information to do that, but you're like, no, 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 I need you to go here because we only have X amount of sessions left until we finish the campaign.
yeah,
So you're trying to almost narrow the scope early. Or early on, you want to broaden the scope, and later on, you want to narrow the scope. And the players are kind of working against that based not because of anything they're doing inherently wrong, but because of the difference in information they have. You know, it's like you're asking them to do a massive carpentry job, but you're only giving them a hammer and 5 nails early on in the campaign, and
yeah.
then later on you're like, oh, here's a million different tools, and you could make anything you could possibly want, like wood and all different types of wood. I just need you to make a birdhouse. I just need you to make a simple birdhouse, please.
That's such a great analogy for high level D&D. Oh my god.
uh, on that note, I guess, Martin,
Yes, Connor.
that's all the time we have for today.
Well, I hope it wasn't a challenging listen. But yes, that was a good convo about like sort of like at least from a DM's perspective, I suppose more so than like really a players. About like sort of like the difficulties that can come with higher level D&D. And just to be clear, like neither of us saying like we hate high level D&D or we're not having
No,
a
I,
good
I,
time.
I enjoy. I don't get me wrong. I have my love for low level D&D and the things I love about it, and I have my love for high level D&D and the things I love about that. Someday I would like to be a high level player in a D&D campaign. That would be nice. I don't think I've gone past level 7 as a player character.
Oof, we'll have to fix that. We'll definitely have to
Yeah,
fix that. Maybe my next campaign.
maybe.
But yes, no, I'm looking forward to seeing what it's going to be like at level 17 in my campaign and what absolute headaches that I gotta have, because I think most of my guys actually cap out around now. Most of them I think get their, because the druid capstone is 14, the sorc capstone is 14. So like my druid can come back in a burst of flames. My sorc has their dragon wings. Um, yeah, it's just Bloodhunter and Rogue. I must have a look again and see what they cap out at like 17 or 14. I think it's around 14 as well.
The rogues also multi-class, so they're not going to hit their high level
Yes.
stuff necessarily.
Yeah,
At least
yeah.
not just yet.
He's got 5 levels. Yeah, 5 levels in fighter. So he
Yeah.
can go to 15 in Rogue. That's gonna be so
15, no,
much.
17 is the cap, I think, in
Yeah,
Rogue.
it's gonna be so
Yeah.
much damage. It's gonna be so much damage. But yes, okay. Connor, where can people find you on the internet?
People can find me on the internet at 0.Conor on Twitter. That's ZeroPointConor. One N, very important. Or every Friday here on the Micflayers podcast on YouTube, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Anchor, Breaker, and Radio Republic. That's 6 p.m. Irish time. Martin, where can people find you on the internet?
People can mostly find me on the internet at Twitter at So Sorry It's Over, which is just below our screens here, and then also on the Micflayers podcast Twitter account, which is at MicFlayersPod. If you do have any questions you want to ask, memes you want to share, or feedback you want to leave for us, you can also leave that in the comment section below, or hit us up on Twitter as well. Okay, that'll be it for this week, folks, and next week we'll be back same time next week for a brand new episode of the Micflayers podcast, and we'll see you then. Bye bye.
Later, folks.